On this edition of the program, everything you need to know about the very congenial vice presidential debate. 2028 preview? Oh. That and a little bit about World War III possibly erupting. It's all coming up.
The following is brought to you by AB Puppy, Just Another Pilot, and Daily Tech News Show.
I think we're here. I think we're good.
Yeah.
I think we're live.
Hey.
Welcome. Hey, Andrew Heaton.
Hey, Justin.
You're back. You're back from Scotland.
I'm not just in America. I'm in Texas.
I know. And I feel like we've switched wardrobes for a minute.
We have, yes. I got back yesterday around 4 p.m. I went, great, good. It's balmy again. I can go back to t-shirts.
Yeah.
I'm in one right now. You've got kind of like a cool Carl Sagan t-shirt with
T-shirt
suit
and
thing going
sport
on.
jacket.
Yeah.
That's my thing. I'm like I'm wearing a sport jacket, but should I? Like that's kind of the vibe. But no, you're looking great.
And you've reproduced since I left.
I did.
Yeah.
I did.
Yeah.
I put it up in there.
Me too, but
it came
I
out.
left mine on the other side of the world. I'm not dealing with that. I'm not dealing with that. Not in a country lacking paid family leave, Justin.
For which was one of many actual issues that were talked about in this debate, which we will go through. I have my notes.
Like we should, having just got back from Britain, we should require our European allies to watch this just so they kind of calm down when they talk to me. Like a significant part of my job when I'm over in the UK is just rogue ambassador, where people walk up and go, how guns? Why?
Yeah.
Right? So like this would have been good for them.
I think on almost every issue, there was a pretty well elucidated point on either side of the
Both of them spoke in
perspective.
complete sentences the entire time.
Yeah.
They both had animating ideas underneath what they were up to.
Yeah.
And they were reasonably friendly for a debate environment. This was significantly better than
reasonably. I think extraordinary.
Yeah.
In fact, I'm trying to rack my brain to the last time that a debate was that congenial. And the last moment I can remember that was close to it was Obama-Romney 1, I think, where Romney's opening line was, Mr. President, I would like to congratulate you and your wife on your anniversary. I can't think of any more romantic place to celebrate it than here with me.
that cut up Romney.
A great line,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah,
Really
yeah.
funny line. But that was like even then, Obama had a sense of dismissiveness that I think was part of his superpower, is that was in the beginning of our Jon Stewart destroys, Republican kind of element, at least on the left. But this was just, I guess the most contentious it got was in the last 20 minutes with January 6th. And even then it was going back and forth. Like they could both talk to each other. It was kind of shocking.
It was spirited, but within the confines of rational inquiry and debate. I wish that a few times I would have liked for them to, I know they can't, I would have been okay with them extending this by about half an hour, which is not normally how I feel. Usually when I finish watching these debates, I go home and go, God, I'm glad I don't have a gun in my house.
Yeah, I know, yeah.
But this time I would have stuck around another 30 minutes.
He just takes a shower
healthcare.
like in the crying game.
Yeah.
He's just like naked on the floor.
This reminded me a bit. The first debate I ever watched was Lieberman versus Cheney. I left a high school debate tournament. Like I snuck out and went home to watch the debate, and then came back and liked both of them at that time. This was back in a period of American history where I actually tended to like.
Hold on. Okay, Lieberman versus Cheney.
As the vice presidential
2000,
candidate. It's back 2000. Yeah.
Gotcha.
And there's probably been intervening debates since then which have been good, but that's what came to mind for me. I thought it was good. I thought it was enjoyable, and maybe at some point we will return to that instead of the sort of lucha libre minus the charm that we've had in presidential debates the last few years.
Well, that's like, I think my top line here is, if you were going to target Facebook ads specifically to independents, never Trump independents, and you were to say, hey, look, if you vote for Trump, that's the matchup in 28. It doesn't work the other way because Kamala's going to be there for 2 terms. So she'll be there no matter what. But if you watch the last debate and you're like, Jesus, like the lady who's doing her oral exam without studying and the guy who's getting cut off at the bar because he won't stop screaming, like, oh, really? If you liked that, that could be the next, those could be the 2 most powerful people in their parties a month after the election, if Donald Trump wins, because he's termed out past then. I do wonder, I guess here, my biggest winner is JD Vance, because coming into this, Tim Walz was known as an incredibly charismatic person. JD Vance was not. JD Vance was known by most people as one of the most unpopular vice presidential candidates that we've ever seen. The vice presidential debate between Sarah Palin and Joe Biden was Looney Tunes. Like, it was, they were dropping anvils on each other's head. They were winking at the camera, and like, it was Biden. I mean, again, prime Biden. So he's like doing all of his shticky Union Hall stuff, and she's being Sarah Palin. This is not that. You know, JD Vance acquitted himself as MAGA intellectual.
Yes, he very much did. I think at the beginning of this, or I'll back up, not discussing policy or substance, which we can get into, but I'm not looking at that. Just in terms of pure debate performance, I think JD Vance handedly won. He handedly won the first half. I think he barely won the second half. But I would give this I would give this to Vance overall. I think Tim Walz came back when Tim Walz began to step out of clearly over-prepared lines that he was trying to remember and recite in response to Vance. That did not go particularly well. Once he finally just started speaking as himself, I think he did fine, and he certainly performed better in the second half. But Vance, to his credit, came off collected and magnanimous the entire time. There wasn't a moment in this debate, just this debate, where I thought he was being a dickhead. I thought he came off at times slightly amused at whatever Walz was saying, but never vicious, not going on the attack. He seemed calm, intelligent, collected. He also has a remarkable ability, for a politician, a truly remarkable ability to evade a question without sounding like he's evading the question.
I mean, that's just great debate etiquette. I mean, if you look from my perspective of watching and studying these debates, that's part of it, is that you have to get to where you want to go in a question without making it seem like you are totally ignoring the question, right?
Yeah.
And so if you do that,
that's a great question. And good questions come from good education. And as governor of Oklahoma,
yes.
that kind of thing, I think most people can see and go, did he? He's pivoting because it's a tough one. There were several times where he was clearly pivoting, but he does it in a way that's a little bit less neon about it. I thought his debate performance was very good. I thought he came off well and pretty much
This was my biggest worry with Walz, is that this is not his campaign. This is Kamala's campaign. Kamala's playbook is very, very thin. It's very, very small. She wants to stay on exactly the topics that she wants to stay on, and she wants to do it because the less she is out there, the more you're thinking about Donald Trump. And she believes that a replacement level candidate who has D next to their name can beat Donald Trump.
Yes.
Because Donald Trump is a 48% candidate. If you can get to 48.5, you can beat him. Tim Walz is a folksy dude.
And he, I think, can speak policy, too. I think you're exactly right about Kamala Harris. She is playing the role of a quantum candidate. She is assiduously avoiding...
She's a smooth pearl that has just emerged, who knows how, from the ocean, for which you can see yourself in.
And she's finally put out some policy papers where she has clarified some things a little bit more, but you have to go looking for them. But with, say, for example, the price controls that were kind of floated out about a month ago. She was not clear early on are we talking like Nixonian price controls, or are we talking on like around the edges anti-gouging laws where you can't increase gas by $3 within a week of a fire, something like that, like very intentionally sort of avoiding that. She's now clarified some of those things. But by and large, though, I think she's occupying that space of maybe Bernie, but probably middle. Yeah. I'm not going to say, but like Bernie people, don't worry. My heart's with you. But at the same time, broadly centrist. So she's doing that. I agree. I don't think that's Tim's credit or Tim's strong point. Tim Walz. I like Tim Walz personally. I like the folksy element. I am also a white guy from a flat agricultural state that is very boring.
Yeah.
So when he talks about
you're from hot Minnesota and he's from cold Oklahoma.
Exactly. So I like those elements of him. He doesn't put my teeth on edge when he gets into policy stuff. I don't think that I would agree with him on quite a few elements of policy. That being said, though, he is able to discuss them, particularly as a governor. He can talk about them. I was actually kind of surprised at some of the stuff he didn't get into, like when he got into housing, for example. I feel like that's something where he ought, if he were running for governor, I think he would be able to knock that out of the park.
He can't freelance on this stuff in a way that he would want to.
Right.
He's got everything he says. Kamala Harris has to be able to say she believes, and that's not the kind of politician he is. He is very much a say it, we'll figure out everything else later kind of politician. And he does it well. He does it folksy. And he does have an ideological backbone. He is a progressive politician that is able to put those ideas out there in a way that is pleasing to others. The problem is that Kamala Harris was a more progressive candidate than he ever was before in 2019, and now she's running as like Dick Cheney's favorite daughter. So he can't say anything that she's going to get a question on and say, wait a minute, Tim said this about zoning. Is that what you believe?
Probably why he was so palpably frightened the first half of the debate. Yeah. We were talking, I think, during the break, where I think what happened was during the 3 days of debate prep, he was getting conflicting things where they're going, okay, we love that you're loose and folksy. Be loose and folksy, but at the same time, don't think off the cuff. Don't think off the cuff. And, don't come off formal, but think about what you're saying. Don't speak in generalities, but at the same time, don't really nail anything down too hard. Don't be specific, but at the same time, we don't want you to we want you to be very general at the same. I think that there was all sorts of contradictory things that he was trying to tightrope through.
Notes on notes on notes.
Yes, which limited his ability. Yeah.
I also don't think that he thought that JD Vance would be congenial.
Or agree with him about a quarter of the time? Because the moments where he was truly freaked out are when JD Vance went, yeah, I think I agree with you on that.
There was one moment, oh God, what was it?
It was housing shouldn't be a commodity and paid family leave. They did not sound that different to me. They sounded like they both sort of agreed on the problem. And the method by which they got there was, their solutions were cousinly rather than oppositional to one another. And that seemed to freak out Walz a little bit.
Okay, so there was during the the child care thing, there was a moment where JD Vance said, "You want to know what? Like, I really agree with a lot of things that Tim Walz just said." And Tim Walz was like, that's good. You're agreeing with me. Then he's like, because the real problem are all the regulatory policies that Kamala Harris is choking out the middle class with. And Walz is like, whoa, no, I don't like that. I was nodding. Now I'm shaking my head. I'm shocked. And anyone who listened to my debate prep episode heard, I thought that there was going to be a lot of offense by both of these candidates based on what they had done before and how they talked about each other on the trail. They've been, because Kamala doesn't want to talk about herself, and Donald Trump is the most defiant candidate.
You had Vance and his media interactions decrying Walz as, I don't know the exact wording here, but basically a traitorous coward for abandoning his unit. Serial liar who abandoned his unit during wartime. And you have Walz going, yeah, but he couches.
Yeah.
So like they've not been playing nice with each other.
And he's hostile to women, and he is the scion, the hood ornament of the corrosive young man that has come out from Donald Trump's America. Like he is the worst. He's the absolute example. And so I thought, because both of them are very capable of going after each other, and we didn't see any of it.
So, okay.
Like, at all. Like, we didn't see any of the stolen valor stuff. We didn't see any of the, like, China was on the table. And there was no, hey, the Congress is now subpoenaing whether or not the federal government is wondering about your connections to China. There was no, you lied about IVF when you and your wife never used IVF. Stuff that Walz has had to admit, like, well, my grammar wasn't the best. Didn't go after him. And similarly to Walz, there was nothing about a couch. Walz has made jokes about that on the stump. I was shocked. I was surprised.
So walk me through this, Justin. What were the goals of these two tactics within the vice presidential debate? Because the people at the top of the ticket have been going for the jugular every chance they can, on and off stage. And I also am not entirely sure. I want to watch the vice presidential debate because I suspect that one of these two people will be very prominent in politics for the next 4 to 8 years, if not both. So this is my first real chance to see them in any great length, right? So for me, this is just general research. I don't think this is going to change my mind on how I'm going to vote. And I don't think anyone in America has, like, you know, I like Kamala and I like Trump. It really just comes down to who their running mate is. So
I agree.
What's the gameplay here where they went gloves on as opposed to gloves off?
I see it more from the Vance side than I do the Walz side. The argument from the Vance side is, and the fact that he started with bio, which he has not done in the past. He did not do in his Ohio senatorial debate with Tim Ryan, but he starts with, thank you for the question. I just want to tell the American people about myself. I was born really poor. My mom was addicted to opioids. We wound up getting out of it, and I served in the Marines, and now blah, 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 blah. Like, that is him saying, America that knows my name hates me. I've got one chance at the top of the debate to introduce who I am and say one big, big, big thing. What the media has told you about me is wrong. If I were that guy, would I be coming off to you nice like I am right now? And that is to the core of not only JD Vance's Trump apology, but also the general element of this campaign, this Trump campaign, is if you reflexively hate Trump for the reasons that Kamala believes that she cannot talk about her point of view at all because you just reflexively hate Trump so much, why? And maybe the more you see of somebody with Trump, the more you see of Trump, the more you're like, oh yeah, that guy. But with Vance, it was something different. So I get it from his perspective. I don't get Walz not going after him more, not needling him more.
I mean, I thought the strongest play for Walz in the entire debate was at the end with January 6th. That was when Vance was really flat-footed, where Vance did a hard pivot. He
can't do anything but try to foul tip.
Right.
There's no winning.
The moderators literally go, you said you would not verify the election. Why? And he's like, well, the real question is censorship. I mean, that's that neon evasion thing. Yeah. And Tim Walz, he had a good line. He went, that is a damning omission. I think that was the phrase, or a damning non-answer, something to that effect.
Yeah.
And I think that he should have brought that up more. I appreciate that they occasionally meandered into actual policy discourse. That's great, but from a win the debate perspective, I think Tim could have gone a little bit stronger, a little bit more offensive.
Well, I mean, or to just say, look, you're feckless. I mean, that's the thing. There was really no personal attacks, like, at all whatsoever. And if the thing that comes out of this is that Tim Walz, who's already thought of as very positively, is thought of as positively, and JD Vance, who's thought of as very negatively, is thought about as positively, then there's only one person who really benefits. In fact, you saw this. This was a JD Vance line. You want to solve these issues, Kamala doesn't. there was an idea of cleaving off to voters, Tim Walz is somebody that is good. Kamala Harris is empty. Tim Walz, authentic.
Oh, that's
Harris,
interesting.
inauthentic.
Providing a permission structure to like Tim Walz without liking Kamala Harris. That's a very interesting strategy, yeah.
Yeah. And that is...
And to some extent, Walz was returning that with Vance. I mean, he said similar things. I think you actually want to solve the immigration problem. I don't think your boss does, that kind of thing.
Yeah, yeah. Although, like, the weird thing is, like, because I'm still trying to square the circle in my head about how the public feels about it. And the only way we're going to be able to tell is after the election. But, like, with Kamala, if she has a really authentic vice president, that weirdly makes her not look good because she's not somebody that is supposed to come off as inauthentic. Whereas, like, Donald Trump is Ronald McDonald. Like, he's like a plastic figurine that just does things the way he's done them for the last 40 years in pop culture, where him having an authentic person is like, oh, so that's the last person that'll talk to him before he makes an impulsive decision that just happens to be whatever it is. Like, oh, I kind of like that. Whereas, like, Tim Walz, there's a reason why he was not being Tim Walz for the first half of it, because that's how he was coached. He was coached to not be like, hey, don't talk about Minnesota every announcer. And it was only, he was good once he did it, because that was authentically him. Mm-hmm. Let's get into the moderators, because I'm sure, and by the way, if you are listening to this, we have not gone on Twitter. At least I haven't since the debate happened. So we don't know what the general mood of this is. The last time I did one of these, I had my entire take about how Kamala Harris had not introduced herself to the public enough. And then I went on Twitter to find out that everybody thought she had crushed it and she was the greatest debater of all time. So with all the assumption that maybe our takes would be different, my guess is that in the right, people are again complaining about the moderators. And the biggest time you saw that was JD Vance going after the moderators for saying that there was going to be no fact checking. We both noticed it while we were watching that Nora O'Donnell fact checked nobody.
That was the weirdest thing. Because, okay, listeners, the exchange was moderator preps with, there's been a big ass hurricane that's killed a bunch of people. Climate change is bad. Do you think climate change is real? What would you do? Vance kind of faints. He goes, hey, we're in favor of clean air and clean water. So he doesn't quite get to the point of saying...
Yeah, he said the biggest thing that you can do with climate change is to not be shipping things back and forth.
Right, and he sort of soft lobs a tariffs are good.
Yeah.
Like somehow through environmentalism, good tariffs. It's coherent. Like, I get it. He's saying, look, like there's lower standards in China.
Yeah.
So if we bring things back from them...
He's on defense. He's trying to foul. He's trying to foul ball.
Tim Walz takes a more straightforward approach. I think answered that question very well, where he's like, what are you talking about? We're producing more energy than ever. We're producing more natural gas than ever. We have all of the above energy policy. He actually answered that very well. And look, we need to build all of these. And then he kind of turned it into a jobs program, but he sort of had we need to be proactive with climate change model. And having now both done this, a moderator just out of nowhere, Nora just goes, scientists agree that climate change is happening very quickly and is causing damage. And then
moving on.
And we were like, what? It was, I mean, I think pretty clearly what happened was that she thought JD Vance was going to say it was a hoax.
Yeah.
And had a speech prepared of her Mr. Smith Goes to Washington moment, I think. And then it felt very weird. It was very weird.
I hate fact checking. I will say this again. I don't believe in moderator fact checking. Not to say that I don't believe that people should look up what people say and point out where they are being rhetorically slippery. It just doesn't belong in the debate. Make an hour-long show right afterward where it's just pouring through clip by clip and you have somebody going through books and looking stuff up, a panel of people debating, exactly what this means. Bring up all your graybeards and your scholars to do that. I'm fine with it. The problem with it in the debate is if you are married to doing it, you have to then be subjectively honest about when you are doing it. And trying to fact check political speech is impossible. Everybody is shading something in their perspective. Some whoppers are bigger than others, but everybody is saying, my opponent wants to kill babies. My opponent wants to ban abortion. Like, would either of them say that? No, of course not. Which one is more right? Well, that's something that you should have a longer form discussion about. I'm glad that they knocked it off, though. To their credit, as soon as JD Vance threw a big fit about it and then they started doing it, they both knocked off the like little rejoinders at the end where they're like, also, here's our opinion about this topic. Moving on. I again plead, now that we're kind of done with this cycle of debates, please, St. Bernard Shaw, ask super screwed up, really dark questions like he did to Michael Dukakis. If your wife were raped, would you support the death penalty for the person that raped your wife? Like, make it dark, ask the question, get out of the way. That's where your art is as a moderator. Ask the most twisted, dark question you possibly can, and then leave, and then go. I would prefer that than the fact checking, because this was like a way to try to get halfway where we're not going to interrupt the candidates. We'll just say our fact check at the end. And I don't think it was good. So I'm glad they got rid of it. What do you think about that? About fact checking during a debate?
I completely agree with you on that. I think being even-handed is easier than it is to be objective or neutral, and the amount of things you could conceivably correct is so high and so rapid pace that there's no way for you to do it in a objective manner. You have to pick, what are you going to, I must speak up now. And invariably you are going to risk playing favorites.
Yeah.
And it would be of great surprise to me if all moderators go into those debates without at some level a hope that one person I think for the most part, they really are focused on their job and their career and everything else, but they're going to have a person that they relate to more than the other. And if you start fact checking on the fly, you're probably going to go harder on the person that you don't like as much. So yes, I'm
well, and
agree
this
with
was
you.
Look, this was the Candy Crowley thing, where Candy Crowley fact checked Mitt Romney, and then Obama dunked on Romney for it and was like, "Say it louder for the people in the back, Candy." And it's like, all right, well now you just like threw Obama a chair to hit Romney with. Like, you don't want that, because then you become the story, and I think it kind of ruined Candy Crowley's career. So
Really?
yeah, well, I mean, you don't see her around much anymore, right?
They had to cut off the mics at one point.
That was the one time they cut off mics, and you avoid this a lot
Which
more.
even then, I got to say, like, I get cutting Donald Trump off with a mic, because Donald Trump will. The question is, what would you do about inflation? And somehow it turns into, there are a billion Hondurans right now laying waste to downtown Detroit, and just keeps going on. And they're wearing Rosie O'Donnell masks. They ripped off Rosie O'Donnell's face, like, and so we got to move on. Beep beep beep. They do it with one that they stopped Vance on. Vance was, I thought, actually making pretty good clarifications about the legalities of. I mean, it was very germane to what they were discussing. There was something to be said. Like, I would have allowed that to breathe a little bit more.
And that's my one last thing about the moderators, is that these rules were built in a post-Trump world. We, in all likelihood, unless Vance gets such good press that Donald Trump's like, nope, I'm debating tomorrow. Where are you going to be, Kamala? I'll be in your living room. We'll debate there. Like, unless that's the case, we've seen Donald Trump's last debate. And I think that in this case, it felt too rigid. Like, there were times where they were cutting him off, and I'm like, no, this is good. Like, I would rather have longer substantive conversations that can go to different places, because they were actually talking about policy. They were actually talking about things that were germane to it. So maybe this is, let's be hopeful, nature healing, that like that it's like, hey, we don't need to build velociraptor fences between each question.
We were with Trump. We were very rapidly getting to the point where the moderators were going to keep a super soaker under the desk to spray him in the face with, as you would a dog. And so perhaps with other politicians moving forward, they need not be so stringent.
Because Donald Trump, even beyond that of a politician, is such a media whore that he just sees 90 minutes of live national television simulcast around the world. And it's like, why aren't I monologuing for 90 minutes? Like, that's only a quarter of one of my rallies. Like, I could do that really, really easily. Why don't I just do it? And so you have to build these walls to say, all right, well, we're stopping here, stop arguing with each other. But in this debate, I really liked when they went back and forth.
Yeah.
I thought it was really good. And not only from a policy perspective, but also from what I love watching, like some of the art of it, of like what they're saying and who's going to get the last word. Like that's stuff that I find rhetorically really interesting.
I would have been okay with the moderators injecting themselves a bit more in that. A good question that I would have liked about 3/4 of the way through is, outside of platitudes, where do you broadly agree? Because it sounded to me like they did have some policy overlap that I hadn't anticipated. I don't think either of them were that different on the family leave, there were a couple of things like that.
No,
where,
I think they almost like out and out agreed by the end of
Right.
it. Because Walz was like, yeah, no, I'm for all the stuff that you were saying, like grants for churches and for parents and stuff like that.
Right.
Like,
yeah. So that wasn't an either or kind of thing. It was I 80% agree with him, but we would go with this other. We're going to go with Rocky Road, whereas they're going with
the
Oreo.
biggest thing is how they pay for it. And Walz and Harris's thing is we're going to make billionaires pay their fair share. And Trump's thing is we're going to take it all from China and businesses that are trying to offshore stuff. Either of them are real. It'll all wind up coming from the same places that it always comes from.
The deficit.
The deficit.
Yeah. It'll come for the deficit. Yes, absolutely. 100%.
So, none of it actually matters, but at least, ideologically.
Actually, and this, now that I think about it, though, the child care credit, or not child care credit too, the paid family leave is ostensibly for the children who will end up paying for the deficit.
Yeah.
So that one, like, it is kind of your fault, kids. Like,
Exactly.
in this instance, I do think the deficit's okay for that. Because I'll be dead. You'll end up paying for it.
All right, we're going to take a break here, and then we're going to come back with our final thoughts.
Do I need to vamp for this?
No. This is your update brought to you by TakePoliticsSeriously.com. That's where you need to head if you want to get 2 bonus episodes each and every week. Big story here that has nothing to do with the vice presidential debate, and that, of course, is Iran launching a missile attack on Israel, prompting air raid sirens and explosions across the country, with some Israeli citizens spending several hours in bomb shelters. The U.S. assisted in intercepting some of the nearly 200 missiles fired from Iran, while Israel's missile defense system handled the rest. The IDF declared the situation under control after 45 minutes, allowing citizens to leave said shelters. While several missiles hit their targets, no casualties were reported. The U.S. is monitoring the situation closely. Both President Joe Biden and Vice President Kamala Harris made statements saying that their unwavering support is for Israel. Iran claimed the attack was a response to Israeli actions against Iranian nationals and interests. It comes after Israel took out the head of Hezbollah last week. Despite the missile strikes, there are no clear evidence of significant damage. Although the Iranian state media claimed success, the IDF coordinated missile interception with U.S. forces were successful. We're on the brink of all-out war between Israel and Iran. Now, what does that look like? I don't know. We've had Ryan McBeth on the show before. He says that it's impossible for Iran to lead any kind of ground invasion into Israel. The question is, right now, how bad does Israel hit Iran? And then does Iran respond to that? So this is the second time that Iran has launched missiles into Israel. Israel, as I talk to you, Netanyahu has said that Iran will pay a price for this. Okay. What does that mean? Does that mean that Israel takes out rocket launching areas? Does it mean that Israel, and this is what you're seeing on some of the talk shows today, that Israel takes out the nuclear facilities that they are aware of? Does it mean something for the supreme leader, the Ayatollah? Who knows? We know that Mossad they are very deep into the Iranian Revolutionary Guard. Who knows? All we know is that the State Department's philosophy of saying, please, we're going to stay up all night and come up with a ceasefire for Gaza, does not seem to have deterred the one thing that you absolutely wanted to avoid, which is a wider war between Israel and Iran. We're here now. Where it will end, who knows? Because what happens past here is even scarier, which is, let's say Israel takes out the Ayatollah. Let's say that they are going to regime change Iran from the skies. Give them the old rise up against Saddam. We've taken out the people in charge. Now, let's hopefully somebody else comes into power. Who fills that power vacuum? I don't know. I don't know enough about it to know. I know I've been frustrated with the State Department. I continue to be frustrated with the State Department. Anytime that you deal with anything in the Middle East, you are never going to get a clean, perfect solution. The only thing that you can do is try to make sure that your interests are taken care of and you're not causing more harm. Boy, we are on the cusp of some really, really ugly stuff. Oh, and by the way, the anniversary of October 7th, right around the corner. Former President Donald Trump has canceled a scheduled interview with CBS's 60 Minutes ahead of the network's planned airings of interviews with both presidential tickets. The interviews featuring Trump and Kamala, where Kamala Harris, I should say Kamala Harris. I don't know. Some people get mad when I don't say Kamala Harris. But Kamala is like Obama. It's a good one-word name. Anyway, they were supposed to be a part of a special Monday edition of the show. Trump's campaign initially agreed to the interview with CBS anchor Scott Pelley, but withdrew on Tuesday, disrupting CBS's programming plans. CBS will proceed with the special, featuring an interview with Harris by correspondent Bill Whitaker. Trump has yet to provide a reason for backing out. I assume that by the time that you listen to this, he probably has on Truth Social, and it's probably because he didn't like the interviewer. Or is this the Trump campaign saying, we're going to message discipline this a little? We kind of feel like if people are mad at the federal government in Georgia, North Carolina, as we're going to talk about in a second, and all this is happening in Iran, maybe Trump needs to say less. And he knows he's going to get baited into saying something ridiculous on CBS. So is this, I don't know. You never want to ascribe message discipline to Donald Trump, ever. It's almost always because he doesn't like the color of somebody's shirt and not like, oh, he figured out less is more. Less is never more with Donald Trump. But maybe. Finally, former President Trump visited Georgia on Monday and used his appearance to claim that President Biden's administration has been negligent in cleaning up Hurricane Helene. Specifically, that Biden has neglected Republican areas of North Carolina and Georgia. Biden from the White House called Trump a liar, emphasizing that the government was doing everything possible. Trump, in his visit to Valdosta, also stated that Georgia Governor Brian Kemp couldn't reach Biden. Kemp confirmed that he'd spoken with Biden Sunday and praised the federal response. Usually that's what you do, regardless of party, when you are a governor that is reliant upon federal money. Trump's campaign framed the visit to Georgia, where he delivered supplies, as a critique of a faulty response from Biden. But the White House argued that early presidential visits would strain recovery efforts. On my free political newsletter, I wrote about remembering the gold standard of this kind of stuff going wrong, and that was George W. Bush's response to Hurricane Katrina back in 2005. Although rereading that, I think that the Katrina reaction was it was to do with a lot of bills kind of coming due with the country and George W. Bush, most notably because of the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan. The economy crapped out, not but a few years later, but that was a moment where people were really excited to be mad about George W. Bush. Katrina's failures were largely local. And I think any kind of historical review of those records would show it, that this is about the Army Corps of Engineers not getting the levees where they needed to go. It was about local response in Louisiana and New Orleans specifically being very piss poor. I remember a friend of mine going down there to shoot something. She works in television, and we both grew up in Florida. And she was down there like 2 years later. She was like, it's amazing how much of this stuff hasn't been cleaned up. Because when you're from Florida, look, stuff gets knocked down, it's rebuilt within a year. It's just a way of life when you are in a place that gets hit by hurricanes all that often. But there is a danger. There's a danger, especially in like Georgia and North Carolina. Those are places that are not used to that amount of rain. They got that amount of rain. So all my love to Asheville, all my love to everybody who is listening to me. If you are in that area, you know people in that area. It's hard to get those kinds of catastrophic weather events. And before, during, and after any of the political stuff, any of the climate stuff, let's just focus on getting our friends and family safe before we start digging into confirming our priors. That is your update. TakePoliticsSeriously.com is where you need to go if you want to sign up for 2 bonus episodes each and every week. I love you guys. I love each and every person that supports this show. Trust me. I really depend on you. And now, back to the show. And we're back. I don't know if this is going to be a thing. It might be on the right. Walz, I just wrote it down. Walz saying that he's become friends with school shooters.
It was clearly they'll probably turn it into some dumb memes. I think that.
Oh, but by the way, speaking of Walz, understandable Walz things that JD Vance didn't bring up to the point where if I'm going to criticize JD Vance on this for trying to be such a nice guy that he didn't really go after Walz at all, is that like Walz has said during a speech, we can't deal with 4 more years of this. No, he was talking about high prices, but I thought that was a ready-made line for JD Vance to say, like, I agree with Tim Walz. We can't deal with 4 more years of this. I also think that he could have squeezed them on Iran more. One of the things that I thought, to me is a no-brainer win for the Trump team right now is that as the Middle East is unstable, you are, I think, more right to drum up the idea of, hey, do you want your children going off to war? I served, and I'm proud to have served, but when I came back from Iraq, I had a lot of questions on why I went. How comfortable are you right now with what's happening in the Middle East, and are you willing to send your child out to serve? Now, maybe you don't want to say that.
But neither of them were willing to actually have a definitive answer on that one. I mean,
but you can build fear. I mean, the 2 things that are beneficial to Trump and Vance in Mideast tensions is number one, it totally erases the idea that Kamala Harris is this random outsider that's running for president. And on day 1, she's going to do all these crazy things. She's the vice president. So she's in the situation where you can't be both things.
Wait, real quick, this is one of the things I felt sorry for Tim Walz on during the debate, where JD Vance did say, she's the vice president, why hasn't she already done it? What Tim Walz can't say is, the vice president has no power and is a useless position. She's totally a symbolic. All vice presidents are symbolic except for Dick Cheney because he got offloaded all this stuff. But she couldn't do anything, right? So she's just sitting there as Biden's shadow. But you can't say that, though, because she's running as an incumbent.
Totally erased Biden. Everything that Biden did, Kamala did. Everything that Biden did wrong, Kamala did wrong. Biden is gone. He has been Stalin 1984 erased from the memory books as far as this conversation goes. There wasn't even any of the rhetorical, the Biden-Harris agenda. It was just Kamala took out all of these Kamala had 94 executive orders to rescind all the Trump border policies. Somebody did that. Biden did that. Kamala didn't. But again, this is the position where it's like, well, you can't take credit for all the things that Biden did that Kamala wants to say without also taking the blame. But it is fascinating that there was no whiff of Biden.
I think we need to come up with a new term for Biden. Like, we've got the president-elect. We've got a lame duck president. Biden is occupying a space I call technically president. He's technically president at this time.
Some good Walz lines. Where are we going to drill and build houses on the same land?
We're pointing out that there's not a lot of federal lands available to build houses in uptown New York City.
That was a bad question too. I really didn't like that question from like look, I get the question when you introduce it from the moderators of Donald Trump has said you would use unused federal lands to build houses. What lands are you talking about? It's a little bit of a gotcha of like, do you really want him to go through like BLM plots and be like, well, plot 145.
The San Fernando National Forest actually does buttress a lot of downtown Detroit. Yeah.
Like nobody really, it's a bad answer. But so Vance pivots away from it, but then they held on to it and they made that the housing question when it's like, no, there's a lot of other housing things that you can get to. Walz saying, here's where being the old guy benefits me. I was in Congress when the ACA was put in. Great. Folksy Walz. One of the things that I thought Vance did well with, and this is where our friends at 24 Site, Tom LoBianco, who wrote the book on Mike Pence, always talks about Pence being the Trump whisperer. Lot of Trump-splaining out of the mouth of JD Vance tonight, to the point where it's like one of the more embarrassing lines from Trump during the last debate was, I have a concept of a plan to replace Obamacare, when Vance does his tap dance of, Tim Walz knows you don't say from a debate stage what you have to do because there's a give and take. There's a negotiation. We want to do a bipartisan deal that everybody's happy with. That's Trump-splaining.
Yes, I think you're right. I think Vance does a far better job of representing Trump than Trump, in my view, because Vance is an intelligent guy. I disagree with Vance on a whole lot of policy. I particularly disagree with him on anything involving trade. I think he's fundamentally wrong and would walk us into immiseration. But he's a smart guy. He's not an idiot, and he's able to present those opinions in a way that comes off measured and calculated and informed. He doesn't sound like a blithering idiot. Whereas a lot of the time when Trump talks, I find myself thinking, I'm not confident he's ever finished a book before. Like he comes off as a very
including his own.
If I would be amazed if The Art of the Deal was not written by a ghostwriter who was screwed out of his own money. I think he is. I think he was famous during the first term of talking about I mean, Vance does a very good job of representing that. Actually, what Trump was saying, if you think about it, was really kind of a line from a Chekhov play, like being able to just retcon in a lot of meaning. Whereas when Trump said "lick my balls," what he was saying, if you think about it, was
it reminds me of something that I once read of Gandhi.
When Trump referred to the vice president as anal beads, when he was making a statement about trade in terms of bead manufacturing.
when he said that Kamala Harris was mentally incompetent, what he really meant was, yeah, I mean, and that's his lane. If you go back to the other choices that Vance had, which, I mean, let me put it this way. And I'm annoyed with myself that I didn't write an actually, I think Vance is doing a good job in this race column, because I think if Donald Trump wins, he was kind of indispensable to it for one big reason. And that is, I believe after Donald Trump's assassination attempt and then the convention, he had a hard time getting back on the road. Donald Trump did not do as many rallies. He was not as electric at the rallies that he did. He was really uneven and just wasn't very present. And so as soon as the Harris switcheroo happened, and then all of a sudden it's like, everyone's excited, brat summer, like Kamala fell out of a coconut tree, this is amazing. JD Vance was the first person to do any kind of stopping of the bleeding by going out to every city that she was doing a rally in and doing a press conference. That was the first time that they brought up the Tim Walz stolen valor stuff. Like, you're not going to win those moments, but if you can do something to stem the bleeding, you're doing something effective. And I don't know. I thought he acquitted himself really well tonight, and so I'm upset with myself that I didn't get out the actually we're underrating JD Vance take before now.
Do you think he's apt to make a better play in terms of swing state voters? I mean, all of this is going to boil down to 70,000 people in 5 states.
Nobody cares about either of these people, right?
Well, I don't mean the debate. I just mean in general. Like, he's in Ohio. Ohio will probably vote for Trump. There were various lines that were thrown out that I think were emblematic of the fact that Kamala Harris and Donald Trump are really both running for president of Pennsylvania from an electoral standpoint. They're both running to be president of Pennsylvania. Ohio's not that far from Pennsylvania. There's some cultural overlap. Like, is Vance apt to have any weight whatsoever with surrounding Rust Belt states?
I don't. Let me put it this way. Does he? Maybe. Are there a few people that watch tonight and they were leaning, maybe I don't vote, maybe I vote for Trump, and then they see JD Vance and they're like, oh, you want to know what? I like him. Or I feel like I was lied to by the media. He's not an asshole. I think he's good. Maybe. But do I think that is more effective than, let's say, people for whom on a base level say in Pennsylvania, they shot Trump in Pennsylvania, I'm voting for the guy who got shot in Pennsylvania? No, I think that Donald Trump's near assassination in Pennsylvania will have more of a meaningful electoral effect on this election than the selection or performance of JD Vance, personally. Yeah. Now, where JD Vance was very effective, I think, at least in terms of how they're talked about, is enthusiasm of hardcore Democrats. Now, their vote was never in doubt, but are they going to post more because they like dunking on JD Vance? It's fun to dunk on JD Vance. Yes. Is there an electoral utility to that? Yeah, I think so. I think it was meaningful when Trump fans loved talking about Hillary Clinton, calling them deplorable. And so if that's true, then this is also true. And I don't know if this debate performance really changes that at all.
You know what I'd like to see? A joint press conference between Dick Cheney and Taylor Swift on why they're endorsing Kamala. We live in that universe now. We live I thought for a long time that
Taylor, I agree with you that we're never getting back.
When we were running the White House, at one point we decided if you intubate protein paste into someone's anus, that counts as, it's not force feeding exactly because it's through the anus. Anyway, shake it off. Yeah.
I once waterboarded Sheik Allah Wallahi while listening to You Belong With Me.
You know what? You Belong With Me was played over 5,000 times in one of the cells we detained someone in without any type of trial. So if you think about it, this is the second time you and I have worked together, Taylor.
Yeah, we live in that universe now.
Yeah.
We live in that universe now. I thought 2016 is, I thought,
and they're driving into it. Like, this is the second time that willfully the Democratic nominees for president have mentioned Dick Cheney's name with a smile on their face. That's insane to me. Like, I still can't wrap my head around that. Like,
the only thing, because I agree, the only thing I can think of is we as a people must truly have a really short attention span. I don't know if this is humans or Americans specifically, but like January 6th, I'm surprised at how minimal that is in this election. It comes up, it's not been completely forgotten, but January 10th, if you talk to me, I'd go, well, that's it. I mean,
Donald Trump has been driven from the public square.
This is it. I mean, like, even the people that like Trump are going, oh, this went too far, right? Nope, it's been 4 years. It's, really censorship if you think of amazed by that, right? So I think the same thing with Dick Cheney. Like, it's gone from Dick Cheney is a man who literally for 10 years didn't have a pulse because he had a heart pump that kept his body moving in one unambiguated circulation until he was able to get a heart transplant and was this kind of bald, stentorian Darth Vader neocon character. And now, because that was season 1 of Game of Thrones, Washington, and we're now on season 5, people are like, oh, I remember him. He was a really fun character. He's in favor of her? Great. Yeah. So that seems to be, it's a name. It's a big name, and I remember that guy. Yeah. He was a big deal. He's the one that butt fed some of those people while listening to the Taylor Swift album. Yeah. That's what I got into Taylor Swift.
So on Friday, we have an interview with our friend Claire from Le Point, the French newspaper. But she's been out actually being a reporter, unlike us, who just sit in our pampered little points of luxury and just say, like, we read the newspaper and say, here's what I think. But she actually goes out there and talks to people. Spoiler alert for that interview. The vibes are not good for Kamala Harris in Dearborn, Michigan, with the Muslim population. And one of the things that she says, that at least in talking to people on the ground there, is that, like, the Dick Cheney thing is not a joke to them. Like, they very much harbor a grudge to Dick Cheney and the way that the Bush administration cracked down, back when censorship laws and federal overreach was about, targeting Muslims. They very much have not forgotten about that. And it is part of the pile-on of why some of them, according to Claire, and you'll hear her in her own words on Friday, are openly hostile to Harris and actively want her to lose. But that's the crazy thing.
Is it possible then that Dick Cheney will win the election for Trump? That's a possibility then, that there's enough, if there's enough swing voters or otherwise Democratic, Arabic or Muslim voters in Michigan that decide to sit it out or vote third party due to Dick Cheney, that he could end up swaying the election?
I can only imagine that in the minds of the Harris-Walz campaign, they have said, whatever we do with Muslims in Michigan is what it is, via con Dios, or whatever the Arabic version of that is.
I can't remember. Assalamu alaikum.
Assalamu alaikum. But we would rather, our more persuadable voters are never Trumpers in the Detroit suburbs, in Auburn Hills or whatever. People that used to be, I will vote for the Republican for the tax cuts. And now that Donald Trump is so odious, and they're like, oh, Dick Cheney, he was one of the last Republicans I liked.
Fair. I think demographically that's probably right. I don't have the numbers in front of me, but my guess is that if you're looking at swing states combined and you're looking at Muslim voters who may not vote Democrat versus pearl-clutching Republican suburbanites, my guess is there's a lot more pearl-clutching Republican suburbanites that would be potentially offended by Trump. And I add, like, I do not like his trade policy at all. My guess is that there's a lot of older Republicans that are in that never Trumper camp that are like, wait, 20%, what? That would go, okay, like, I guess Harris is now the pro-trade candidate?
Yeah, with that kind of stuff, it's like, it's so interesting what we cherry pick from the Trump, like, the 4 years that we have a record of Trump, right? Like, there is no shared truth there. There's no, like, yeah, the economy was really good. People were really happy about the economy. COVID happened. we can have our conversations about COVID, but nobody really wants to have an in-depth conversation about COVID because, Donald Trump's biggest unpopular thing at the time was he was being too laissez-faire, but you can make an argument that his laissez-fairness compared to Europe is part of the reason why our economy recovered faster. And the Democratic solution was more lockdowns, which is now very, very unpopular. Right. So everyone's just like, COVID, yada, yada, yada. And then January 6th, awful, right? So now Trump, Vance are like, economy, the best, the greatest thing that ever happened. And now the economy sucks, so let's get back to the economy. Whereas on the other side, it's like, and that's with the tariffs. It's not like he was saying the same stuff then about the tariffs, and then the economy was good. So it's like the idea that it will tank the economy now is interesting. But
correct me on this.
Yeah.
He's been saying that he wants to raise tariffs by 10 or 20%. That is more than he raised it previously, right? So he's running on increasing it from what he already did considerably.
The Trump philosophy, as I understand it economically, is there are tariffs on things that either outsource American jobs to a point that he thinks that is not good. And really what he wants is to rebalance the trade deficit with China. China is really the biggest thing, right? That when we talk about tariffs,
right,
he talks about China very broadly and Mexico specifically, of like, if you think you're going to move to Mexico, I'm telling you before you lay the first brick that each car is going to be a 2,000% tariff. And essentially he's saying, this is like golf course talk for like, don't do it. You're going to do this. And you hear it in some of this, stories. He tells a story with like Emmanuel Macron where he's like, Donald, we are going to put on, this thing. And he's like, well, all champagne, 3 million% tariff. Oh no, Donald, you cannot. And then he's like, and then guess what? He took away the thing I didn't like because I threatened to ruin his business in champagne. That's the way I understand his philosophy. That's how I understand
I think that there's a good argument. Listeners, I apologize. I promise we won't go too far on trade, but it is a sticking point for me. I think the good argument I've heard in favor of tariffs is that they are a tool which can be economically leveraged.
It is a bargaining chip
to dissuade economic competitors from unfair practices. So, for example, China's stealing a bunch of IP. We don't have a means to prosecute China, so we threaten to increase tariffs to make them knock it off. Okay, I think that there's a good argument to be made there, but I don't think that's what Trump or certainly Vance were talking about tonight. Vance at no point said anything like that. There was no implication that tariffs are a temporary phenomenon in order to exact good policies out of our opponents. It was very much a permanent thing in order to preclude capital from leaving the country or labor from being outsourced, a kind of permanent protectionist barrier in order to try to build up domestic policy. And that I think is what Trump and Vance are saying.
Yeah, I mean, again, with Trump, who knows? That is the gift and the curse of big chungus.
So recently, I got invited to give a talk at the Royal Scots Club right before I came back from Scotland, and so many of the questions that I answered, I had to go, okay, here's what could be a good faith Trump argument in terms of like when foreign policy. I'm like, Trump could be a Kissinger-style realist who is concerned with power play and for that reason is looking to limit America's footprint in Europe as opposed to a robust liberal internationalist perspective like the neocons. So you might see this break where Kamala's more in the neocon thing and Trump is more of realist Mearsheimer camp. Also possible, he just thinks people respect his balls. Like I don't know. Because he'll kind of go both ways. It's because they respect me. It's like, okay, now he's going with the big dick thing. Yeah. It's hard to tell. It's really hard to tell.
I mean, and that's the thing.
If only we had some sort of erudite hillbilly from a Rust Belt that could give lip to these conundrums.
Explain what is happening. All right. Any final thoughts?
None.
All right. Andrew Heaton, The Political Orphanage. Very glad you're back. Of course, we have the We're Not Wrong show. Well, we'll be talking about this with Jen Briney, so we'll get Jen Briney's thoughts tomorrow. But good to chat with you.
Good to chat to you. Good to be back.
And that'll wrap it up for us today. Politics, brought to you by me, Justin Robert Young, for Dog and Pony Show Audio in Austin, Texas. A big thank you to Andrew Heaton joining us. Jet lagged as all hell. Man came straight out of London, right here into your loving arms. Greatly appreciated that. If you want to send me an email, it is theyoungamerican@gmail.com. If you want to find us on social media, it is Justin R. Young at TikTok, Instagram, and X. On the YouTube, we've got our whole shebang. YouTube.com/@politics. And you can find the audio version of this show, px3podcast.com. If you'd like to support me with a one-time donation, you can do so. PayPal.me/payjury. Venmo is Justin-Young-20. Cash App is PX3Cash. And you can send me anything you'd like in the mail. P.O. Box 153184, Austin, Texas, 78715. You want to get our bonus content, you go to TakePoliticsSeriously.com. $3 tier gets you 2 bonus shows per week covering all the news that we miss on our free podcasting schedule. And our $10 tier gets your name read at the end of the show like these fine folks in the Titanic $10 tier. Edwin, invoke Gloria Young for King of the New World Order. Mike, Edison. Jeremy, a dog named Checkers. Sarah, Jeannie, Matthew, Phil, Dr. G, his nerdiness Charles, Neil, Darren, Idris Erslanian, Berkeley, Stephen, Chad, Zombie Doc, Matt P, Chill, Sean, song notes by David Potts, Nicholas, Sparky from Stevens, Florida, Fat Tony's PJs from New York, Michael, Devon, CFP, the Borge B, Will, Gloria, my mom, Gray Zone, Peepaw, Robert, J, Marcus with a Q, DP4 Bongo, Sam, John, Niemeister, Chief Andy, Robert, Casey, Paul, Adam, Dr. Whiskey, Dustin, D Laser, Nick, Joe, Middle Age Mike, The Gen, Elo, D Reilly, Craig, and Andrew. You want your name read. One place to go, TakePoliticsSeriously.com. But we will see you guys on the free feed next on Friday. We will have not only Claire from La Poix to talk about Dearborn, Michigan, and where else? Where else was she? She was in Dearborn. Oh, in Springfield, Ohio. They're eating the dogs. They're eating the cats. But Claire interviewed actual people in Springfield. We have that, and Michael Cohen is back on the show. I have a very nerdy polling questions for him, specifically about this Gallup survey that has an R+3 environment, which would be the most favorable Republican environment that we have seen in my lifetime, in modern history. 3 points more favorable than when George W. Bush won the popular vote. I want to talk to him about that. I want to talk to him about how to read where we are right now. But that's Friday. You get the Thursday episode if you're a patron. Until next time, this is your old pal Justin Robert Young saying, some shows talk about politics, others talk about politics, and still more discuss politics. But this is the only show that dares discuss. Oh, 3.
Diamond Club hopes you have enjoyed this program.
Dog and Pony Show audio.